Forsaken by Fate, Crowned by the Moon, Chapter 1. The night the moon wept. The forest was silent that night, too silent for a world still alive. Only the wind dared to whisper, carrying with it the scent of blood, pine, and something broken beyond repair. Arya stumbled through the cold earth, her bare feet painted red from the stones and the cuts she could no longer feel. The mark on her neck, once the symbol of her bond, burned like molten silver. Every step dragged another pulse of agony through her veins, the mate bond tearing itself apart from the inside. He was with her now, the other woman. Arya could feel it, the raw, possessive pleasure through the bond as her fated mate, the Alpha King Kincaid, touched another. Each heartbeat was a knife, each breath a betrayal. The moon goddess had bound them by fate, but the king had chosen pride over destiny. Her wolf whimpered weakly inside her mind, voice fading. "It hurts, Arya. It hurts too much." She fell to her knees, the world spinning into a haze of red and silver. The full blood moon hung above, vast, unblinking, cruel. Tears slipped down her dirt-streaked cheeks. "You gave me to him," she whispered to the sky, her voice trembling. "You gave me to a man who only wanted power. And when he broke me, you watched." The forest didn't answer. Even the moon seemed distant. "Why, moon goddess?" she cried, her voice breaking. "Why do you give men all the strength and women all the pain?" Something cracked inside her. Not just her heart, but the ancient thread of the bond itself. She clutched her chest, a scream tearing from her throat as white-hot pain exploded through her body. "If this is what it means to be chosen," she gasped, collapsing against the earth, "then I curse your choice. I curse your blessing. I curse the power that lets kings destroy the souls meant to love them." The blood moon flared brighter, washing the forest in crimson. Her last breath was a whisper. "If the moon ever remembers me, let her make me her wrath." Then silence. Her body went still. Her wolf, the fragile Omega she had always been, died with her. But far above, the moon trembled. And deep in the airless silence of the night, a light began to stir, silver, wild, ancient. A whisper echoed across the stars. "So be it, child. You shall be reborn, not as the Forsaken, but as my Luna." The earth around her glowed faintly. Her body began to fade into light, hair turning white as moonfire, skin glimmering like frost. When the wind swept the clearing, she was gone. Only the scent of silver and sorrow remained. Chapter 2. The Awakening of Two Wolves. The forest was not the same when she opened her eyes again. The silence that met her wasn't empty, it was alive. Every leaf, every drop of dew, every shiver of wind carried a pulse that wasn't there before. She felt it through her skin, through her bones, a deep vibration that called her to breathe again. Arya gasped, air flooding into her lungs for the first time since her death. But it wasn't ordinary air. It was thick with energy, wild, silver, ancient. The scent of moonlight and ash filled her chest as her body remembered what it meant to exist. She lay on her back, eyes opening to a canopy of trees that glowed faintly with veins of silver light. Her vision was sharper than it had ever been. Every line of bark, every flutter of wing, every faint thread of sound reached her, as if the world itself whispered only for her ears. Slowly she pushed herself up. The soil beneath her glimmered faintly, touched by some divine residue. When her fingers brushed it, light followed her touch, a soft ripple of silver flame that danced briefly, then sank into the ground. Her reflection in the pool nearby stole her breath. Her hair, once brown and tangled, now shone white as frozen moonlight, cascading in waves down her back. Her eyes, no longer the warm amber of an Omega, were a pale, piercing blue-gray, the kind that could freeze a river midstream. Her lips were the same, soft and curved, but her expression held no innocence, no softness. The same body, a different soul. She rose slowly, feeling the pull of muscles she didn't know she had. Every movement felt effortless, graceful, like a dance she had always known but forgotten. Her wolf was silent, and yet she could feel her, not as a separate voice in her mind anymore, but as an echo of herself, breathing with her heartbeat, moving with her body. They were one now. "You are not what you were," whispered a voice within her, deep, eternal, feminine, and cold. "You are the moon's hand in the world of men." Arya turned her face toward the sky. The moon was still there, faint behind dawn's pale light, watching her with that quiet, terrible stillness. "Why bring me back?" she whispered. "Why me?" The voice did not answer. Only the wind replied, brushing her cheek softly, as if in apology. She closed her eyes, the memories slashing through her mind like knives. Kincaid's lips on another woman, his hand gripping her arm, his voice telling her she wasn't enough, the unbearable pull of the mate bond as he made another his Luna, the way her wolf had howled before it died. Her jaw clenched, tears threatened, but she forced them back. That woman, the weak Omega who loved a king, had died beneath the blood moon. The one who stood here now was something else. "Then let them feel what they made," she said softly. "Let them know the pain they taught me." The air stirred, and the trees seemed to bow, their branches lowering in silent acknowledgement. The earth under her feet hummed faintly with a power that wasn't hers but answered to her will, and somewhere beyond the horizon, someone felt it. Far to the west, beyond the forgotten mountains, and deep within the shadowed valleys of the Rogue Lands, Raven stood atop the cliffs of an abandoned watchtower. He looked like the ghost of an alpha, tall, built with the raw strength of a wolf who'd fought too long and lost too much. His black hair was streaked with silver near the temples, his jaw shadowed with rough stubble. A scar ran from the corner of his left eye to his jawline, not deep enough to mar his beauty, but enough to mark him as dangerous. His eyes, deep iron gray, carried the weight of every life he'd taken and every betrayal he'd endured. Below him, the valley stirred with movement. Fires flickered among the ruins, not of a pack, but of survivors. Rogues, exiles, forgotten wolves who had nowhere else to go. They called him Alpha now, though he'd never asked for it. To them, he was the one who refused to kneel, the one who gave them something stronger than a pack, a purpose. The night before had been ordinary. Another raid, another loss, another day in exile. But when the blood moon rose, something changed. The wind had howled differently. The air had carried a whisper that clawed at his mind. Not a sound, but a call. He felt it again now. A pull from the east. Soft, insistent, impossible to ignore. He clenched his fists as his wolf stirred restlessly beneath his skin. "Find her." He spun around sharply. No one was there. But the whisper lingered. Ancient, feminine, powerful. His second in command, a scarred wolf named Darek, stepped up behind him. "You sense it too, don't you?" Darek asked. "The air feels wrong." Raven's gaze drifted east, toward the thick line of forest that separated his lands from the northern kingdom. "Not wrong," he said quietly. "Different." "What do you think it is?" Raven didn't answer, because deep inside, his wolf already knew. Something old had awakened, something the moon herself had touched. The ground beneath him thrummed, and the firelight flickered toward the east as if drawn by invisible breath. He felt his pulse quicken. His instinct screamed of danger, but another part of him, older, deeper, whispered that he had been waiting for this. "Prepare the pack," he said finally, his voice low but certain. "We move east at dawn." "To what?" Darek asked. Raven's lips curved into something between a smile and a warning. "To whoever the moon just crowned." When the first light of day broke through the trees, Arya was already walking, barefoot, silent, her white hair trailing behind her like light. The forest moved for her, branches swaying out of her path, the wind swirling gently around her form. Everywhere she stepped, the soil whispered. Every creature turned to look. And though she didn't yet understand why, she could feel it, the balance shifting. The power that had once belonged to kings was bending, quietly, toward her. She didn't know that miles away, a rogue alpha was following the same pull, that the same wind brushing her cheek carried her scent to him, that the same moon watching her rise had whispered to him of her existence. All she knew was that the world was listening, and for the first time in her life, it was listening to her. "I am not his Luna," she murmured to the forest. "Not anymore." The wind stilled, and in that silence, something vast and ancient moved, as if the moon herself smiled faintly behind the clouds. That night, the rogues began their march east, silent shadows among the trees, led by a man who didn't yet know that destiny was already waiting for him. And under the light of a pale silver moon, the woman who had once died beneath betrayal took her first step toward becoming its wrath. Chapter 3. When the moon called his name. The forest was heavy with silence when they crossed into the eastern border. Raven could feel it before his wolves did. The air itself had weight. It pressed down on his lungs, thrumming with an energy older than any alpha bloodline. Every step his pack took made the earth hum faintly beneath their feet. The scent that had haunted him since the blood moon now hung thick in the air, silver, faintly sweet, and threaded with something wild, something that didn't belong to mortals. "Do you feel that?" Darek murmured beside him, eyes scanning the mist. "She's close," Raven said quietly. "Don't speak her name. Not yet." He didn't know how he knew it was her. He just did. The pull had been growing stronger with every mile, like a string tied to his chest, tugging him eastward. It wasn't the call of a mate bond. It was something greater, something divine, and it made his wolf restless with awe and unease. The pack moved quietly through the fog. Birds had stopped singing. The air grew colder, sharper, until their breaths misted white. Then they saw it. A clearing where the light bent strangely, as though the forest itself was holding its breath. At its center stood a woman, small, slender, her hair a cascade of silver white that shimmered even in the shadows. She stood barefoot in the grass, eyes closed, her hand hovering above a dying tree. The bark cracked softly beneath her touch. And then, before their eyes, the tree bloomed again. White petals unfurled along the branches, glowing faintly in the dark. The rogues froze. None of them spoke. Raven stepped forward. He had seen power before, raw, savage, bloody. But this was different. This was silent power. The kind that didn't roar, didn't need to. It simply existed, and the world obeyed. Her eyes opened then, pale, icy, unearthly, and for a heartbeat, their gazes met. It felt like the forest exhaled. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly, her voice smooth but sharp enough to cut through air. Raven's chest tightened. The voice was neither threat nor fear. It was a statement of fact, the kind spoken by someone who already knew the end of every story. "I followed the wind," he said, stepping closer. "It led me to you." Her expression didn't change. "Then you should have ignored it." He took another step, eyes locked on hers. The wind doesn't lie, and it doesn't bow, not unless something stronger commands it. For a moment, her eyes flickered, a faint surprise, quickly buried under cold indifference. I don't want followers, she said flatly. Or wolves, or pity. Good, Raven replied, his tone low, steady, because I didn't bring any of that. The rogues behind him shifted uneasily, the air heavy with tension. Some of them whispered, Is she the one? The cursed Luna? The moon's child? Arya turned away, gaze lifting toward the distant peaks. I know what you're here for, she said quietly. Revenge. Power. A new kingdom built from the bones of the old. I have no interest in any of it. No, he said, his voice rough with something deeper than defiance. You have something greater. She frowned faintly. And what's that? Raven's gaze didn't waver. A purpose that calls the moon to her knees. The forest seemed to stir around them again, the wind circling their forms, whispering softly through the branches. Arya felt it, the same whisper that had haunted her since her rebirth. It was no longer just her curse, it was calling him too. For the first time she hesitated. Why do you follow me? She asked quietly. Because the same pain that killed you, Raven said, is the one that made me. The words sank into the air like iron. He didn't beg her to lead. He didn't promise loyalty. He only offered truth, and that more than anything reached her. Arya looked at him for a long time. At the scar on his face, the quiet strength in his stance, the darkness in his eyes that mirrored her own. The wind said they're yours, Raven continued, his voice soft but unwavering. The forest, the rogues, the outcasts, the broken, all of them. They don't want a king. They need a Luna who knows what it means to be forsaken. Her heart clenched, not with warmth, but with recognition. The air pulsed faintly around her, responding to something she hadn't chosen. She closed her eyes. The moon's voice, faint and distant, whispered within her. It was never about love, child. It was about balance. When she opened them again, the silver glow in her irises deepened. Then they will follow, she said at last, her tone calm and cold. But not for war, not yet. Then for what? To learn to live, to rebuild, to wait. Her gaze lifted toward the north, where the Alpha King's palace lay hidden beyond mountains and rivers. The time will come for vengeance, but not before we're strong enough to end it for good. Raven inclined his head, not in submission, but in respect. Then we wait, he said. A faint wind swept through the clearing, lifting her hair like a banner of white fire. The rogues bowed their heads, not because she asked, but because the world around them did. And beneath the watchful eye of the moon, the forsaken Luna and the rogue Alpha stood side by side for the first time, two souls broken by fate, now bound by something far greater. Not love, not power, but destiny, and the promise of the war that would one day shake the kingdoms of wolves. Chapter 4. No limitation in the world. Dawn unstitched the night from the world in slow, pale threads. Mist clung to the trunks and pooled in hollows, making the forest seem half memory and half dream. Arya moved through it like a thing that belonged more to shadow than to flesh, white hair a comet's tail behind her, bare feet leaving silver prints that withered into dew. Every breath carried newness and old wrath at once. The moon's hand still sang in her bones. She stopped when the trees thinned into a small clearing. There was a scent in the air that did not belong to the forest. Iron and warm wool, the tang of recent smoke, the musk of many wolves moving together. Her wolf stirred beneath her skin, alert, curious, not frightened. He stepped into the light like an answer to a question she hadn't asked. Raven's silhouette broke the fog before his voice reached her, low, steady, wrapped in command. He did not push forward arrogantly. He advanced with the quiet certainty of someone used to being obeyed. He was not someone to be dismissed. Tall, broad-shouldered, the cut of his clothes practical but precise, his movements economical, purposeful. The scar along his cheek, a white line that split his face, made him look as if battle had carved truth into him. His eyes were a hard iron gray, watchful, assessing. When he spoke, his words fanned the mist aside. "You there," he said. No greeting, no softness. "Who are you, walking the woods like you own the moon?" Arya's laugh was short and hollow. "Who would you be to ask?" Raven's gaze flicked to the small cluster of figures behind him. Rogues, yes, but not a scattered rabble. They held themselves with a discipline that came from years of surviving together. They watched him with the kind of trust men reserve for one who has proven steady when everything else has failed. He carried that trust like a shield. "I am Raven," he said. "I go where the wind tells me. Today it told me to come east." He did not explain more. He had no explanation beyond the wind. He had felt the pull in his bones like a claw. He had left when it gnawed at him until he obeyed. He had answered without knowing what he would find. That knowledge, the blind obedience to an instinct older than his grievances, was enough. Arya's eyes narrowed. The wind? Many things ride on the wind. Wolves, rot, lies. Raven's mouth hardened, but his tone stayed even. The kind of wind that will not be ignored. He paused, then added, the single confession of a man who does not scatter himself. Something roared in the night. I listened. She watched him. He did not ask for her story. He did not claim her. He did not bow. He stood like a pillar of something dangerous and necessary. That steadiness unsettled her more than threats ever had. "You're far from any pack," Arya said. "You could turn back." Raven's laugh was a quiet thing, almost a sound of taste. "And go where?" He shoved the question back at her. "There's no calling me home anymore." Behind him, the rogues shifted, a ripple of patience and readiness. They were close enough to be useful and far enough to be respectful. They did not crowd. They waited. They trusted his judgment. The trust in his presence was palpable. Not worship, but the solid kind of reliance that makes men follow a man into fire and not ask which way the flames will fall. Arya studied him. She had no interest in becoming anyone's myth. She had just been given a second life and wanted a single plain thing, to be left alone to let the hate that had birthed her cool into something she could aim with purpose. Raven surprised her by speaking of himself without flattery, without the long, venomous recounting of a past he wore like armor. He kept his wound compressed and precise, not to gain sympathy, but to place a fact beside her. "I've been cast," he said, as if naming a weather. "Left with a handful of wolves in the road. I taught them to move like wind and strike like a tide. We are not kin to anyone who wears crowns. If the wind brings me east, I come. That's all the answer I have." He met her eyes, then, and the look was not pleading. It was an iron demand for truth without pretense. "So tell me, why does the wind pull you like a tide?" She wanted to be furious at him for that line of question. It revealed nothing but asked everything. She wanted to tell him to leave the woods and the world both, and let the moon have her justice alone. She wanted to keep the fresh, raw thing inside her hidden until it hardened into a blade she could use on the right throat. Instead, she answered the way someone who had seen death answer, honestly and lightly hoarse. "I do not belong to the wind. The wind belongs to me, or—" She lifted her chin. "It belongs to whichever god is foolish enough to listen." Raven's mouth tilted at that, less amusement than a shadow. His eyes looked, in the way hunters look, for the measure of something. He didn't demand a story, but hung on the scraps he could find. He watched the way the earth bent when she moved. He felt, in the hollow places inside him that had been emptied by exile, the small tremor of recognition, not of her, but of the tilt in the world that had begun the night the moon burned red. The rogues, as ever, stayed quiet. They had their own reasons for following. Some had packs that had died to crown another man. Some had been marked and then thrown away. Theirs were hollow truths and raw wounds. None of them had come because a woman had been reborn. They had come because the air told them to go with Raven, and Raven had come because he answers a call he doesn't need to understand. "You don't want to lead," Raven said plainly. "Then don't. I'm not here to crown queens." His voice held no malice, only the steel of a man who knows his own authority. "But if the wind insists, I wanted to know why it calls you." The question sat between them like a sharpened thing. Arya's posture loosened. The edges of her will, still raw from death and the moon, softened for the first time. She let the silence gather before she said anything, tasting the sound of his words. "I woke beneath the blood moon," she said finally, the sentence like a blade dropped into water. "I woke, and the pain that used to be mine is gone, and a new thing sits where it belonged before. The world listens differently now. The wind spoke to me once, but it was not a direction. It was a reckoning." Raven absorbed that without any visible sign of surprise. He had not expected a confession, nor did he appear to be counting on one. He nodded once, the motion curt. "Then it's worth seeing what the world has remembered," he said. "For all I know, the wind's whisper will be nothing more than a storm that passes." "But when a storm is gathering," Arya countered, "it kills without prejudice. I won't walk into another man's throne room so he can call me plaything for his pride." Raven's jaw tightened. He had lived too close to thrones and their poison to be naive. "No one asked you to do that." The words were blunt and true. "If there's a reckoning to be had, it will be on our terms." Arya regarded him for a long time. In his face she could read lines of battle, of nights spent watching dying embers, of hands that had known both the rope and the blade. He was rough, yes, but not reckless. He did not bow. He did not beg. He was an alpha cut from a different grain, one who asked questions before issuing commands, who let the world answer itself when he could not. The rogues shifted forward, closer now. Not to press, but to be present. Their faces showed hope, calculation, and hunger. The complicated mix of those who have nothing left to lose. A young woman with a missing ear stepped closer, her hand on the arm of a small boy. Someone else, an older man with a limp, weighed his gaze on Arya and Raven like a jury turned in private. Raven addressed them, not with orders, but with the steady voice of leadership. "We are here because wind called. I will not demand you lay down your fate for anyone. We move as one because we choose to. If we find that following the wind sacrifices everything we have left, we will stop. But I will see what calls me. If you come as free wolves." The rogues murmured, a ripple through them. It was not the roar of a pack saluting a new alpha. It was the sound of people deciding to walk once more beneath a single shadow. Arya watched him orchestrate their will without commanding, and there was a strange respect in her that she did not mean to feel. He did not kneel. He did not grovel. He simply stood inside his authority and invited others to stand with him, if they wished. That kind of power was like the moon itself, steady, inevitable, not flashy. She chose her next words as a leader chooses a blade, slow, deliberate, cutting to reveal truth. "I will not be your queen tonight. I will not claim to lead men who have not earned the right to follow. I will not be paraded as the moon's pet." Raven nodded once. Understood. He took a single step back, not as retreat, but in deference to a boundary he would not cross uninvited. "I will make 2 promises," Arya said. Her voice, which had been an edge of frost until then, softened with an odd, disciplined warmth the rogues had not seen before. 1. I will not ask you to die for me. 2. I will think on what the wind asked. Raven's expression did not change, but something uncoiled in the air, a small, almost private exhalation. The rogues held their breath. Then one by one, they bowed their heads, not in worship, not in unconditional fealty, but in recognition. A pact of recognition, of seeing an alternative to the world that had spat them out. Raven stepped forward once, closing the small measure of distance between him and Arya. Up close, she could see the way his eyes held decisions like coins he could trade but rarely spent. He inclined his head slightly, an alpha's salute without the theater. "We go east at dawn," he said. "You will come if you choose. The wind brought me for answers. I will not force them." Arya looked at the faces around her, at the trust in their quiet obedience to his voice, at the ember of something like hope in a child's eyes. For the first time since the moon had ripped her back from death, she felt the world not as a thing that had wronged her, but as something that might be harnessed. She lifted her chin, and the morning sun cut across her hair, setting it aflame. "I will think," she said, "and if I lead, it will be differently. There will be no crowns, no blood-forged bargains. We rebuild first. We learn strength. Then we decide whose head must fall." Raven accepted that line without a question. His voice, steady as rock, issued the simple directive that finished this fragile beginning. "Dawn, east. We move together or not at all." The wind answered as if it had been waiting for that exact arrangement, a small, approving gust that stirred leaves and ash. For the first time in the little valley, something like order began to form. Not the brittle order of crowns and decrees, but the rough, vital order of wolves who had chosen one another. Arya turned once to look at the moon, a pale scar in the daylight. Her wolf whispered something like a promise in her bones. She closed her eyes and let the world press its first favors in her palm. "No limitation in the world," she repeated, not as prophecy, but as a choice. And for now, that choice was enough. Chapter 5. The Blood in the Moonlight. The night had deepened, thick and heavy with the scent of pine and wild earth. The moon hung low and swollen, bleeding silver light across the forest floor, bathing the clearing in a glow that shimmered between beauty and danger. Arya stood at the edge of the clearing, her eyes half-lidded, her wolf restless beneath her skin. For days she'd walked beside the rogues, listening but never speaking much, observing the alpha who had found her, or perhaps who had been led to her. Raven. He was nothing like Kincaid. Where the Alpha King was polished, proud, and regal in his perfection, Raven carried raw power that did not need proving. His shoulders were broad, his stance unshaken, his gaze sharp enough to cut through lies. Yet behind his feral intensity lived a quiet kind of loyalty, something that made even the wildest rogues follow his word without question. Tonight, that same quiet fire burned in him as he approached her. The others had set up a makeshift camp, fires flickering, laughter fading under the chorus of crickets. The wind rustled through the leaves, whispering her name. "Arya," he said finally, his voice deep and edged with authority. "You've been walking with us for days. You don't speak of who you are. You don't sleep. You don't rest. What is it that keeps you moving?" Her gaze flickered to him, cold, distant, unreadable. "The dead do not rest," she murmured. He frowned, his wolf rising under his skin, sensing the truth beneath her words. "You're no ghost." "No," she whispered, her lips curling in a shadow of a smile. "Worse." Raven took a slow step closer, not out of threat, but curiosity, something primal tugging at him. The scent around her was unlike any he'd ever known. It wasn't the sweetness of a Luna or the sharp dominance of an Alpha. It was ancient, wild, laced with moonfire and grief. "The winds led me to you," he said. "Every path I took ended in your scent. Every howl carried your name. I don't know why, but I can't turn back. The forest itself pushes me toward you." Arya tilted her head slightly, her silver-white hair catching the moonlight. The forest obeys no alpha. I never said it did, Raven replied, his tone firm, but low. It whispered. It warned. It showed me what it wanted me to see. A shadow with eyes that see through men's souls. For the first time, her gaze softened, just slightly. And what did it show you? That you would destroy everything that betrayed you, he said without hesitation. And that I would help you do it. Arya looked at him, and for a heartbeat the silence between them was thick enough to choke on. You know nothing of me, she said coldly. You don't know what I've lost. You don't know what burns beneath my skin. No, Raven said, his voice steady. But I know the look of someone who's been broken by the people who swore to protect them. I know the ache of being betrayed by blood, by bond, by love. His tone grew darker, a storm brewing in his chest. My brother, the Alpha King, cast me out. Called me unworthy, a threat. Took my pack, my land, and my name. He said I was no longer fit to lead. I built my own pack from ashes. The ones they called rogues. The ones the world spat on. They followed me because they had no one else. And the moon. She never turned her face from me. At that, Arya's eyes flashed. Something flickered deep within them. She stepped closer, the air trembling as her power stirred, subtle and frightening. You are the Alpha King's brother? She asked, her voice cold and low, but dangerous. Raven didn't notice the shadow that passed through her eyes. I was, he said. Now I'm just Raven. Her wolf shifted beneath her skin, restless, snarling, bleeding memory and fury into her veins. Her hands curled at her sides as her heart raced. She didn't let him see the storm behind her calm expression. Raven stepped closer still, close enough that she could feel the heat of him. You don't have to speak, he said softly. The forest speaks for you. The wind calls your name, Arya. The wolves follow the trail you leave. They're waiting. Not for me. For you. Her throat tightened. You think I'll lead you? I think you already are. Silence again. The fire crackled in the distance, the howls echoing faintly through the trees. The moonlight caught the pale streaks in her hair, glowing like threads of silver fire. Finally, Arya turned away, her voice low but steady. If the forest sent you, then maybe it's not done with me yet. Raven gave a faint nod, his gaze never leaving her. Then we walk the same path, until it shows us why. As he turned back toward the camp, Arya stood there, the moon painting her in silver and shadow. For the first time since her death, she felt something stir inside her. Not warmth, not hope, but the pulse of purpose. The forest whispered again, and this time it was not just her name it carried. It was his too. Raven. 2 souls. 2 betrayals. 1 fate twisted beneath the blood moon. The beginning of the Forsaken Luna's rise had just begun. Chapter 6. The Rise of the Forsaken Pack. The forest was no longer silent. It breathed. It watched. It moved with her. Every night since that encounter beneath the blood moon, Arya could feel it. The rhythm of the earth pulsing beneath her bare feet, the soft hum of the trees whispering to her in a tongue older than wolves themselves. The wind carried voices now. Sometimes she thought they were ghosts. Sometimes she thought they were the moon's way of reminding her she was no longer one of the living, but she was something more. The rogues, broken wolves, lost souls, and outcasts, had begun to gather. They came one by one, drawn by stories whispered through the wilds, of a white wolf who rose from death, whose howl could shake the skies, whose eyes burned like the moon. At first she ignored them. She didn't want their reverence. She wanted vengeance. But every time she looked at them, the scars on their bodies, the fear in their eyes, the way they bowed their heads when they saw her, she saw herself. And she couldn't turn away. Tonight, she stood before them for the first time. The clearing was wide, ringed by ancient oaks that towered like silent guardians. The moon's glow drenched her in a ghostly light, turning her hair into a sheet of white silk that shimmered with faint traces of silver. Her eyes, once soft brown, were now luminous gray, cold and unyielding. The rogues stood in a half circle, silent, waiting. Raven stood at her right, tall, steady, his scar catching the moonlight like a slash of silver fire. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence alone was enough to calm the pack. Arya's voice broke the silence. Low, firm, sharp as a blade. "You came here looking for a leader," she said. "But I am not your savior. I am not your queen. I am what the moon made me, what betrayal shaped me into." She took a slow step forward, her bare feet sinking into the moss. The wolves shifted uneasily, the air thick with awe and tension. "I died once," she continued. "I died because I trusted the bond, because I believed that the moon's will was justice. But I was wrong. The moon gives power, and men use it to destroy what they cannot control." Her gaze swept across the crowd, the rogues, the scarred warriors, the broken women clutching their young. "You were cast out because you didn't bow. You were hunted because you didn't submit. You were forgotten because you were not useful to the powerful." A murmur rippled through the crowd, a sound of anger, of pain, of shared wounds. Raven's voice rose then, deep and raw. "The Alphas called us beasts, said rogues have no honor, no pack, no code. But tonight, we stand beneath the same moon that blessed them. And we are still here." The rogues growled in agreement, the sound low and thunderous. Arya looked at him, a small flicker of something like respect passing through her eyes. "You speak as though you've been waiting for this moment." Raven's lips curved faintly. "Maybe I have. The wind led me to you for a reason, Luna." "I am not your Luna," she said sharply. But the air trembled when she spoke, and the forest stirred, as if disagreeing. Raven's gaze darkened, but his tone stayed calm. "Then tell the forest that, because it already bends for you." The wind swept through the clearing, strong enough to make the trees groan. Leaves spiraled into the air, circling around her like a storm. The wolves fell silent. Even the fires seemed to bow lower in their pits. Arya closed her eyes, and the whispers of the forest flooded her mind. "Forsaken no more. Lead them." Her chest rose and fell with a sharp breath. When she opened her eyes again, the silver glow in them was blinding. "Then we build something new," she said. "Not a pack bound by power, not ruled by bloodlines or alpha titles. We are bound by pain, by what was taken from us, and we will reclaim it." Raven took a knee before her then, not in submission but in acknowledgement, a warrior's bow. The rogues followed, one after another, until the entire clearing was kneeling under the moonlight. Arya stood at the center. No crown, no throne, just the fire of the wild burning in her veins. "I am the Forsaken Luna," she said. "And together, we will rise." The wolves lifted their heads and howled, a sound that split the night open, echoing across the borders of kingdoms. Chapter 7. The Birth of the Forsaken Rain. The moon was waning, its light softer now, but her fire had only grown stronger. Months had passed since that night beneath the blood-red moon. The wilderness that had once been wild and untamed now carried the heartbeat of something alive, something united. What was once a band of scattered rogues had become a force, a pack without the old laws, a home for the broken, the forgotten, the betrayed, and at its heart, her. Arya stood on the rise overlooking the valley she had chosen. Below, the forest spread out like an emerald sea, framed by jagged cliffs and rivers that glowed under moonlight. The air was thick with pine and frost, harsh but sacred, the kind of land no kingdom dared to claim. "This place breathes," Raven had said when they first found it. "It's wild, untouched, like it's been waiting." Now it was more than waiting. It was becoming. The wolves below her moved like shadows among the trees, building, hunting, training. Small dens carved into the rock walls housed the young and the wounded. Fires burned in circles where warriors sparred, their growls echoing like thunder. The air shimmered faintly, touched by the power of the moon goddess. A sanctuary shielded from prying eyes. They called it the Hollow Veil, the hidden heart of the Forsaken. Arya had not asked them to worship her, but when she walked among them, every wolf lowered their head, not in submission, but in recognition. She was not an alpha. She was something older, the spirit of every Luna who had been betrayed. The howl that answered the pain of the forgotten. Raven approached from behind, his presence calm but solid. "They've started calling it the Veil of the Ghost Queen," he said, folding his arms as he joined her at the cliff's edge. "You're becoming a legend already." Her gaze stayed on the valley. "Let them call it what they will. Legends don't matter. Balance does." He studied her profile, the silver of her eyes reflecting the moonlight, her expression carved from steel and sorrow. "Balance," he echoed. "Or vengeance." "Both," she said softly. "One cannot exist without the other." Below, a horn sounded, a deep, steady note. Another group had arrived. She turned to see a dozen wolves emerging from the tree line, thin, scarred, and wary. Among them were 2 women with pups clutched close, and 3 men with the scent of blood and exile heavy on them. One of the guards bowed his head as they approached. "They found us through the wind, Luna. They said they followed the scent of the moon." Her heart stirred, not with pride but with purpose. "Bring them in," she said. "Feed them. Let them rest. They will train when they're ready." The rogues nodded, ushering the newcomers into the veil. Raven watched her, his eyes dark and thoughtful. "Every week there are more of them. Wolves from the south, from the eastern mountains, even from the border packs that once swore loyalty to your king. Word spreads faster than we can count." "Good," she murmured. "Let the word reach the throne." Raven's lips curved faintly. "You want him to know." She turned toward him then, slow, deliberate. "No, Raven. I want him to fear." The power in her voice rippled through the air. Even the forest quieted. Every few nights, her spies, silent wolves and falcons bound by the old moonlight, returned with whispers from the kingdoms. She never asked for details of the king's daily life. She wanted the tremors of his rule. Which alpha beat his mate to claim a stronger one? Which beta betrayed his own to rise? Which pack sold their own kind to power? And then she moved. When the moon was full, her warriors slipped into those territories. Unseen, unstoppable. They came like ghosts through the fog, leaving only silence behind. No blood was spilled without reason, but those who ruled through cruelty began to vanish, one by one. Some found their power stripped overnight. Others found their wolves gone mad, haunted by dreams of white fire and silver eyes. No one could prove it was her, but everyone knew. They began to whisper her name in council meetings. The Forsaken Luna, the Ghost Queen, the White Wolf of Judgment. And with every whisper, fear took root. In the cities, alphas began to hesitate before raising their hand against a weaker wolf. Packs started protecting their omegas and young not from love, but from terror. They built shrines to appease the unknown Luna, offerings of silver and blood left under the moon. Raven had once said power came from domination, but what Arya built was something else entirely, reverence born from dread. That night, as the fires burned low and the stars turned pale above the veil, Arya stood before her pack once more. Warriors lined the circle, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. The air smelled of smoke and snow. She raised her hand, and the wind rose with her. "The alphas ruled with cruelty," she said. "They called the weak unworthy. They took what they wanted and left ruin behind. No more." Her voice deepened, vibrating through every chest in the circle. From this night forward, no wolf shall be forsaken again. We will be the hand the moon turned away from. We will bring justice where her silence fell. The wolves bowed their heads, their growls rising in unison, not of submission, but of unity. Raven stepped closer, his voice low. They would die for you. She turned her gaze to him, sharp, unflinching. Then I'll make sure they never have to. The moon broke through the clouds then, drenching the vale in cold silver light. The forest howled, long, mournful, triumphant. Far across the land, in his golden fortress, Alpha King Kincaid stirred in his sleep, his heart pounding, his wolf restless. He dreamed of white fire, of eyes like twin moons staring into his soul. And somewhere deep within him, a voice whispered, "She's coming." Chapter 8. The Echo of the Bond. The night had turned still, too still. Far from the dark forest where the forsaken Luna's pack rose beneath the blood moon, the royal fortress of the north stood bathed in quiet light. The great stone towers, gilded halls, and marble courtyards shimmered under the silver glow. To any outsider it looked untouched, proud, strong, eternal. But inside, something had begun to rot. Alpha King Kincaid jolted awake. His chest burned. Not a dull ache, a searing pain that clawed through his ribs like fire and ice. He sat up, breath ragged, one hand clutching at his heart as his wolf howled inside him, a sound not of power, but of terror. He stumbled to the window, his palms braced against the cold glass. The moon hung high, crimson at its edges, bleeding faintly, like a wound reopening after years of silence. And through that blood-stained light, he felt her. "Impossible," he whispered, but the pain in his chest said otherwise. The mark, the bond he thought dead with her, burned again. It was faint, erratic, but alive. He had felt that agony once before, the night Arya had died. The moment her wolf had been torn apart by his betrayal, the bond had shattered, leaving behind only emptiness. He had felt it fade, like the last flicker of a dying candle. But now it pulsed again, and with it came a presence, powerful, ancient, furious. His wolf, once proud and dominant, whimpered within him. "She lives," it whispered. "She rises." Kincaid gritted his teeth. "No, it can't be her." But the air around him shifted. The moonlight through the glass thickened, heavy and red, casting his reflection in shadow and silver. For the first time in years, the Alpha King felt small. He turned away sharply, his jaw tightening. "It's just the moon. A trick." But the memory crept back. Her eyes when she'd realized what he'd done. The look of heartbreak that had cracked her soul before her body even fell. The moment he'd chosen power, the Luna bond with a woman of status, of strength, over the weak Omega who had been his fated mate. He had thought the pain would fade, that time and dominance could erase guilt, that his kingdom would make the emptiness worth it. But the kingdom felt cold now. His throne, heavy, his new Luna, nothing but a hollow crown beside him. A knock sounded at the chamber door. "My king?" It was General Corvin, his second in command, a man who had been with him since his first conquest. Kincaid straightened, his expression hardened. "Enter!" The general stepped in, bowing slightly. "You felt it too, didn't you?" Kincaid's eyes narrowed. "Felt what?" "The surge," Corvin said, his tone uneasy. "The wolves across the borders are restless. The Luna mark on our territory walls. It flickered tonight. Some say they heard howls from the west. Not rogues, not wild packs. Something else. Something old." Kincaid's jaw clenched. "There are always whispers. Ignore them." Corvin hesitated, then lowered his voice. Forgive me, my king, but this feels different. Even the younger wolves woke from sleep in panic. The forest itself trembles. Kincaid turned away from him, staring at the moon once more. His reflection in the window looked haunted, eyes sharp but hollow, the weight of the crown heavy on his shoulders. She's gone, he said quietly. The Omega is dead. Then why, Corvin asked carefully, does the bond still burn? Kincaid didn't answer. He couldn't. He pressed a hand to his chest again, feeling the throb of power beneath his ribs, the wild, untamed energy that wasn't his, her energy, the wolf that should have been gone. Only now it felt different, stronger, untouchable. When the door closed, silence filled the room again. Kincaid looked at his reflection. And for the first time in his life, he didn't see a king. He saw a man haunted by a ghost he'd made himself. He whispered her name. Arya. And the wind that crept through the open window seemed to whisper back. Not anymore. Far in the wilderness, beneath the same moon, Arya lifted her head suddenly. Her silver eyes gleamed, her breath sharp as frost. The mate bond, broken and dead, had flared like a spark in her chest, only to fade again. She knew he had felt it too. Good. Let him remember. Let him fear. Because the next time he saw her, she would not be the Omega he left to die. She would be the storm that ended his reign. Chapter 9. Whispers before the storm. The moon hung low that night, half hidden by veils of cloud, its pale glow filtering through the forest canopy where the forsaken Luna's camp stood. Fires flickered between wooden huts and tents woven from furs. The air smelled of smoke, steel, and the faint sweetness of herbs from the healer's den. It was no longer just a band of rogues. It was a home, a rising kingdom in the shadows. Arya stood at the edge of the cliff that overlooked the valley they'd claimed, her silver-white hair glowing under the moonlight. Her eyes, once soft and filled with longing, had hardened into frost and resolve. She watched the warriors below, training, laughing, living, and though her expression remained cold, there was a ghost of pride in her stillness. Behind her, the sound of boots crunching against rock announced Raven's arrival. You watch them like a queen, he said, voice deep and steady, roughened by a lifetime of command and loss. His words carried no mockery, only truth. I watch them because they trust me, Arya replied, her tone distant. And trust is heavier than loyalty. It binds deeper. Raven stopped beside her, folding his arms. The scar running down his cheek caught the moonlight, a blade mark that should have disfigured him, but instead made him look carved from war itself. You've built what alphas feared to even imagine, he said, a pack that bows to no bloodline. They bow to no one, Arya corrected. They follow because they've lost what the world took, same as me. He studied her for a long moment, his storm-gray eyes unreadable. You speak of loss as if it's all you are. I am loss, she said quietly, but I learned to shape it into something that bites back. The wind moved around them, cold and whispering. Raven's wolf stirred within him, restless, drawn to her wildness, her power that resonated like an old song he had long forgotten. Something's shifting, he murmured, glancing toward the west. The wind smells of silver and deceit. It's carrying stories from the borders, packs trembling, kings meeting in secret. Arya's eyes narrowed. Let them. Fear spreads faster than fire. Raven tilted his head slightly. And what if they strike first? She turned to him fully then, her gaze sharp as the moonlight that burned in her eyes. Then they'll learn that even the gods themselves cannot unmake what they've reborn. For a heartbeat, silence reigned, just the crackle of torches below and the low growl of distant wolves. Then Raven stepped closer, his voice lowering to a tone meant only for her. You've made the world remember your name again, Luna. But revenge burns fast. What will be left of you when it's done?" Her breath hitched, not out of weakness but out of the sting of truth. "It doesn't matter," she whispered. "The world took my heart once. It won't get the chance again." Raven's jaw clenched. He wanted to argue, to tell her she was more than her pain, but he knew better than to challenge a storm in the making. Instead, he bowed his head slightly, a rare gesture from an alpha to another. "Then let me stand beside you, not behind you." She gave no reply. But as the wind shifted again, brushing her hair across her face, her silence was answer enough. Below them, the rogues trained harder that night. The whispers of the wind grew stronger, carrying tales across packs and kingdoms of the forsaken Luna and the alpha rogue Raven, the ghosts who built an empire of outcasts under the blood-stained moon. And somewhere, beyond the borders, the Alpha King stirred in his golden palace, his heart clenching without reason, as the shadows of his past began to wake. Chapter 10. Blood in the Wind. The night broke heavy with the scent of rain and iron. Clouds rolled across the sky like bruises, dimming the silver moon until only slivers of light cut through. Far across the valley, where the trees grew darker and the fog thickened, the Silverclaw pack was on the move, hunters in formation, armor polished, blades glinting faintly. Their alpha, Graven Silverclaw, was known for two things: his thirst for dominance and his cruelty toward the weak. He had once boasted that rogues were vermin, to be culled for sport. Now, his scent spread through the forest like a warning. Arya felt it before the scouts even came running. She stood in the clearing, the wind swirling around her cloak, her eyes closed as she breathed in the faint metallic tang. "Blood," she murmured. "But not ours. Not yet." Raven appeared beside her, silent as a shadow. His presence was grounding, steady, raw, commanding. "They're testing borders again," he said, his tone clipped. "Graven's wolves. They've already killed 3 strays that refused to bow." Her silver eyes opened slowly, the reflection of lightning flickering in them. "Then it's time they learn we don't bow either." The rogues began to gather behind her, men and women once broken, now sharpened by training and loyalty. They carried scars like badges and looked to her as both savior and retribution. The Forsaken Luna had become their myth, and tonight, their myth would draw blood. Raven's hand brushed his blade. "You lead the vanguard," he said. "I'll take the flank. If they're here for war, they'll get it." Arya turned her gaze toward him, reading the unspoken meaning in his eyes. He wasn't offering to protect her. He was standing with her. And that, in her world, was the rarest loyalty of all. By midnight, the rain began to fall. The clash happened in the heart of the forest, where the trees stood like ancient witnesses. The Silverclaw warriors charged first, howls echoing like thunder. But the rogues didn't scatter. They moved as one, every strike calculated, every motion honed by weeks of Arya's brutal discipline. Raven was a beast in motion, his claws tearing through armor, his eyes glowing molten silver. When his wolf surfaced, it wasn't the wild fury of a rogue. It was controlled violence, the kind that left no survivors. Arya moved differently, fluid, silent, almost ghost-like. Her wolf flickered beneath her skin, its white essence radiating with unnatural power. The rain couldn't wash her scent away. It spread through the battlefield like moonlight, cold, commanding, divine. The moment Graven saw her, he faltered. She wasn't a myth anymore. She was real. "You," he snarled, half in fear, half in disbelief. "The Luna they whisper of. You're just an Omega." Arya stepped closer, drenched in rain, her hair plastered against her glowing skin. Her voice was calm, deadly, almost beautiful. "Not anymore." The wind howled then, literally. It twisted around her form, slamming into the trees, scattering leaves and dirt in a perfect circle around her. Graven tried to shift, but his body trembled. The very earth beneath him seemed to refuse his command. Raven appeared behind him in a blur, one claw at his throat. "You should have stayed silent," he said, his tone a growl vibrating with dominance. "The wind warned you." Raven's eyes widened. You follow her?" Raven's smirk was slow and dark. "No, I stand with her." And in that heartbeat, Arya raised her hand, calling the storm. The lightning answered. When it was done, the clearing was silent, nothing but the hiss of rain and the heavy breath of survivors. Silverclaw's forces had broken, their bodies scattered. The survivors fled, their howls echoing far into the night. Arya stood still among the wreckage, her chest rising and falling, her aura burning brighter than the moon above. She wasn't trembling from exhaustion. She was trembling from the power, something ancient that had awakened in her tonight. Raven approached her slowly, his chest bloodied, his scar slick with rain. "You've shown them," he said. "The Forsaken Luna isn't a story anymore. She's a warning." Her lips curved faintly. Not a smile, but something sharper. "Good," she whispered. "Let the kingdoms tremble." For a long moment, Raven just looked at her. There was blood between them, stormlight around them, and something in her eyes that could swallow kingdoms whole. "You know this won't end here," he said finally. "Kincaid will hear of this. He'll come." "I hope he does," she answered, voice low and cold. "Because when he does, he'll find I no longer bleed for him." That night, under the storm, the legend of the Forsaken Luna spread like wildfire. The packs began to whisper, the kings began to fear, and the moon goddess, far above, watched her child of pain become a queen of vengeance. Chapter 11. Shadows over Thrones. The scent of blood lingered in the rain for days. Even after the bodies had been buried and the ground washed clean, the forest still hummed with a kind of energy, wild, ancient, unyielding. The rogues called it victory, but to Arya, it was only a beginning. She stood at the edge of their growing settlement, watching as the warriors rebuilt the barricades, as the healers tended to the wounded. The children ran between the tents, laughter mixing with the crackle of the fires. It was almost peaceful, almost alive again, almost human. Raven found her there, as always. He didn't speak at first. He rarely did unless words carried weight. His presence was enough. Solid, grounding, the kind of quiet that could only come from someone who'd survived too much. "You didn't sleep," he said finally. His voice was rough, deep, almost like gravel dragged across steel. "I don't need to," Arya replied, her silver eyes fixed on the horizon. "Not when the world still burns for men like him." "Kincaid?" The name came from Raven like a blade unsheathed. She didn't answer, but her silence was sharp enough. "The rumors will reach him soon," Raven continued. "They already spread through the border packs. They call you the Ghost Luna, the moon's wrath, the one who hunts the betrayers." Her expression didn't change, though her fingers brushed the silver pendant at her throat, the last piece of her old life she hadn't destroyed. "Good," she whispered. "Let him tremble every time the wind howls." Raven's eyes softened. "You want him to suffer." "I want him to remember." Her tone cut through the air like frost. "Every scream, every betrayal, every drop of blood he drew when he marked another woman while I died beneath the same moon that blessed our bond. I want that memory to rot his soul." The wind stirred then, colder than before, brushing against them like a living thing. Raven tilted his head slightly. "The moon hears you again." "Then let her watch," Arya said. "Let her see what her forsaken child has become." Far from the forest, deep within the marble walls of the Crescent Palace, another kind of storm gathered. Alpha King Kincaid stood before his council, his face unreadable, though the tension in his jaw betrayed him. The great hall was bright with golden chandeliers and perfumed candles, but the air felt heavy, choked by something none of them could name. "Reports from the west," his beta said, bowing his head. "The Silverclaw pack was destroyed. The survivors speak of a woman leading the rogues, a woman with hair white as the moon and eyes that glow like fire." The king's hand tightened on the armrest of his throne. He said nothing for a long moment. "Rogues exaggerate," one of the elders said with forced laughter. "They tell ghost stories to hide their shame. A woman commanding them? Absurd." But Kincaid wasn't listening. The description, those eyes, that hair, it coiled around his mind like smoke. It couldn't be. It shouldn't be. "She died," he muttered under his breath, almost to himself. "The moon took her that night. I felt it. His words faltered. The memory struck like a blade. Her scream, the scent of blood, the bond shattering inside him like glass. "Your Majesty?" the beta asked carefully. Kincaid looked up slowly, his dark eyes gleaming with something dangerous. "Send scouts to the west," he ordered. "Every rogue den, every whisper of rebellion, find this woman." "And if she exists?" Kincaid's lips curled into something between anger and disbelief. "Then I'll see her with my own eyes, and end her again if I must." But as his words echoed through the hall, his wolf stirred inside him, uneasy, restless. The part of him bound once to her power, her soul, now trembled with the echo of something ancient. And somewhere far beyond the walls of his kingdom, the wind shifted, carrying her scent across miles of forest and stone, wild, fierce, unbroken. His wolf growled deep inside him, not in anger, in recognition. Back in the forest, the fires burned bright through the night. The forsaken Luna sat before them, her reflection dancing in the flames. "The kingdom knows now," Raven said from across the fire. "They'll come." "I want them to," she replied. "One by one they'll learn. The weak no longer kneel." The moonlight bathed her in silver, her eyes catching its glow like glass. She looked otherworldly, untouchable, no longer the broken Omega the world once pitied. She was the reckoning they'd whispered about in their sleep, and for the first time in centuries, even the gods seemed afraid of the balance shifting. Chapter 12. The Bond That Wouldn't Die. The night was silent. Too silent. Even the forest, usually alive with rustling leaves and the low howls of distant wolves, seemed to hold its breath. Arya sat alone on the edge of the glade, her knees drawn up, her cloak pooling around her like liquid shadow. The moonlight kissed her pale skin, tracing the faint pulse in her throat. Her fingers toyed absently with the silver pendant resting against her collarbone. It had once been the mark of her bond with Kincaid, the mark of the Alpha King's Luna. Now it was only a scar that refused to fade. She closed her eyes, listening. The forest hummed, the wind carrying whispers that only she could hear. But beneath the sounds of life, beneath the rhythm of her own heart, there was something else. A tremor. A pull. It was faint at first, like a thread tightening around her soul. "No," she breathed, her hand clutching her chest. "Not again." But the pull grew stronger. It burned, soft, electric, impossible. It was the mate bond, broken, dead. And yet, somehow, it stirred again. Her breath came sharp, uneven. Images flashed unbidden behind her eyelids. The warmth of his touch, the scent of his skin, the sound of his voice saying her name not as a command but as a vow. Then came the pain, the betrayal, the other woman's laughter, the mark burning as her wolf screamed. Her body trembled violently. "Stop," she whispered through clenched teeth. "You don't get to reach for me now, you don't." But the bond didn't listen. It pulsed like a second heartbeat. Raven found her like that, on her knees, her nails digging into the dirt, her breath ragged as if she were drowning in invisible fire. He didn't hesitate. In 2 strides he was at her side, his hands gripping her shoulders. "Arya!" She flinched, her eyes snapping open, silver burning with feral light. Her wolf was near the surface, fighting something unseen. "He's calling," she rasped. "He's searching. And the bond." Raven's grip tightened. "Then cut it out of you. Don't let him touch what he already destroyed." "I can't," she hissed. "The moon tied us. Even in death, she won't let go." Raven's expression hardened. He pulled her to her feet, steadying her until she stopped shaking. "Then I'll help you make her listen." Their eyes met, and for the first time in a long while, she saw no pity in a man's gaze, only raw understanding. Raven knew what it meant to carry pain like a second skin. "Breathe," he said, his voice lowering into a growl meant to anchor her wolf. "You're not bound by him anymore. You command the wind, Arya. The earth moves for you. Remember who you are." Slowly her breathing steadied. The fire in her eyes dimmed into something calmer, cold but controlled. "He's sending scouts," she murmured. "I can feel it. His wolves are near the border already." Raven's jaw tensed. "Then we'll show them what it means to cross into our lands." She nodded once, her strength returning like the tide. "No killing, not yet. I want them to go back alive. I want them to tell him what they saw." Raven gave a grim smile. "You want to haunt him." Her lips curved faintly. "Exactly." By dawn, the rogues were ready. The mist rolled thick through the valley, veiling the traps they'd set, masking their movement. Arya walked ahead, her cloak trailing behind her, her aura spreading through the air like frost. Every step she took made the wind stir, whispering warnings to those foolish enough to enter her territory. It didn't take long. The scouts came, 5 men in black leather, Kincaid's crest gleaming faintly on their necks. They didn't expect what they found. When they stepped into the clearing, the mist shifted. Figures appeared all around them, rogue warriors with silent, deadly eyes. And at the center, the forsaken Luna. One of the scouts stepped forward, forcing confidence into his tone. "We come under the Alpha King's command. We seek—" He stopped when her gaze fell on him, and his voice faltered. Her presence was nothing like the woman Kincaid had destroyed. There was no weakness, no submission, no warmth. She looked like something born of the moon and fury itself. "You seek death," she said softly, "but I'm feeling merciful today." Raven appeared beside her, his presence towering, his aura radiating dominance that even seasoned alphas would bow before. "Run," he told the scouts. "Tell your king she's no ghost. She's the storm that survived him." The scouts hesitated only a moment before turning and fleeing into the forest. Their fear filled the air like the scent of blood. When they were gone, Raven turned to her. "He'll come now. He'll have to." "I know," Arya said quietly. "And I want him to. Let him cross the line I drew. Let him see what his forsaken mate has become." The wind rose then, swirling around them, lifting her hair like strands of silver fire. Somewhere far away, the moonlight broke through the clouds, and Kincaid, in his palace, froze as that same wind brushed past him. The bond pulsed once more, and he knew. The dead did not stay buried forever. Chapter 13. Echoes of the Forsaken. The throne room was silent, save for the echo of boots striking marble. Each sound was sharp, cold, deliberate, the rhythm of an alpha who'd lost his patience long ago. Kincaid stood at the center of the hall, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes fixed on the trembling scout kneeling before him. The man's clothes were torn, mud-stained, his throat marked with faint bruises that still shimmered with leftover magic. "Say it again," Kincaid ordered, his voice quiet. Too quiet. The scout swallowed hard. "She's alive, Alpha. The Luna, your Luna. She's alive." For a moment there was only silence. Then a low, dangerous chuckle slipped from Kincaid's lips. "Alive," he repeated softly, as if testing the word on his tongue. Do you realize what you're saying? I saw her, Alpha, the man stammered. We all did. Her eyes, silver like the moon, her power. She froze the air around us. And there was a man with her. A rogue Alpha. They called him Raven. The sound of that name snapped something inside Kincaid. His hand twitched, and before anyone could react, he struck. The scout hit the ground hard, coughing blood. Raven, Kincaid growled, pacing. The Alpha of the exiled? The one who defied every law and survived my purge? The second scout dared to speak, voice trembling. He protects her. They called her the Forsaken Luna. That title hit the air like a blade. Every warrior in the room lowered their gaze. Even the flames in the braziers seemed to flicker lower. Kincaid turned away, staring toward the massive window that overlooked the darkened forest. Forsaken Luna, he murmured. How poetic. My once queen, now queen of rogues. He clenched his fists, nails biting into his palms. I marked her, I broke her, I watched her fall. So tell me. His voice dropped, a whisper laced with madness. How can she still be breathing? No one answered. No one dared. I made her, Kincaid snarled. Whatever power she has, it came from standing beside me. She learned to fight because I let her. She learned to rule because I allowed her to sit beside my throne. He paused, his gaze distant. And now she thinks she can rise against me? With a rogue at her side? Beyond the reach of his castle walls, the moon shone high over the mountains. And though Arya couldn't see him, she felt him. The bond thrummed again, a pulse that was no longer just grief, but fury and obsession entwined. She stopped walking, closing her eyes. The wind around her shifted, carrying the scent of him, smoke and iron and memory. He knows, she whispered. Raven, walking beside her, glanced her way. Let him come. Arya opened her eyes. The silver in them burned like stars. Oh, I intend to, but this time I won't be the one kneeling. The night howled with her promise. Chapter 14. The Moon's Call. The forest was breathing that night. Every leaf rustled like a whisper, every shadow carried warning. The moon hung low and swollen, its silver glow spreading across the encampment that Arya now called home. She wasn't dressed like a queen, no crown, no jewels, only a cloak of dark gray and leather armor that fit her like second skin. Power hummed softly beneath her skin, wild and unrestrained, like the storm that always lingered behind her eyes. Raven approached quietly, his steps silent despite his massive frame. His golden eyes caught the moonlight, flickering like a dying flame. There was a shadow in them tonight, a knowing weight that hadn't been there before. He's moving, he said simply. The forest was alive with sound. The crackle of torches, the low rumble of growls, the thrum of hundreds of heartbeats beating as one. Tonight, the Forsaken Luna would claim her throne. Raven stood beside her, silent, powerful, his arms crossed, golden eyes scanning the crowd below. The tension in his jaw betrayed what his heart would never say aloud: fear, not for himself, but for her. Arya lifted her chin and the murmuring ceased. My wolves, she began, her voice soft yet carried like a command through the air. You were once broken, cast aside, betrayed. You were told that your pain made you weak. She paused and her gaze swept over them. But look at you now. A roar answered her, low, fierce, full of pride. They took our homes, she continued, our families, our names. They called us rogues, cursed us, hunted us. They believed we would fade, disappear into the dark like ghosts. Her eyes flared, burning silver. And so we did. But we did not die in the dark, did we? No! Voices thundered back. We became the dark. The crowd howled, the air trembling with the force of it. The trees shivered as if bowing to her words. Arya raised her hand, and silence returned like the pull of a tide. Tomorrow, the Alpha King comes, the same man who once held my heart in his hands and crushed it for power, the same man who burned your villages, who called your pain meaningless. He believes that he faces rogues. Her lips curved in a cold smile. But we are not rogues. We are the Forsaken, and we bow to no Alpha. Even the wolves in their beast forms howled into the night sky. Raven stepped forward, his voice cutting through the roar. You heard your Luna. Tomorrow we fight not for revenge alone, but for what was stolen from us, for freedom, for every child who cried for a father that never came home, for every mate who died under another Alpha's greed. He turned to Arya, eyes locking with hers. For her, I'll tear down the kingdom itself. The pack roared again, the sound shaking the ground. Arya looked at Raven, something flickering behind her calm, a spark of warmth she refused to name. At dawn, she said, her voice steady, we rise. Tonight, we rest as one. Tomorrow, the moon will bear witness to the reckoning. Raven nodded once and stepped down among the warriors, giving orders, arranging patrols, setting traps. She watched him move through the crowd, his presence alone bringing discipline and resolve. When the clearing finally quieted, Arya stood alone beneath the moon. The forest whispered around her, the wind curling like fingers through her hair. She closed her eyes, letting the magic hum against her skin, the same wild pulse that had reborn her beneath the blood moon. Then came a faint voice, soft, distant, but unmistakable. My Luna. Her eyes snapped open. The voice wasn't from any wolf nearby. It came from somewhere far, from a bond that should have been severed long ago. Kincaid. For a heartbeat, her chest tightened, the memory of his scent flickering like an echo of a dream. Then she clenched her jaw, forcing the emotion away. You feel me now? She whispered into the wind. Good. Feel what you've created. The wind hissed through the trees, carrying the faintest scent of smoke and steel. The war had already begun. Chapter 15. The Scent of War. The battlefield stretched before him, endless woods shrouded in mist, the scent of pine, blood, and something else, something he thought was gone forever. Kincaid stood at the edge of the clearing, his armor catching the faint shimmer of dawn. Behind him, thousands of warriors waited in formation, the royal army of the north. The banners of his house fluttered high, silver wolves on crimson cloth. Yet, despite the show of strength, his pulse was uneven. He could smell her. Arya. Impossible. My king. The scouts report movement from the western ridge. Rogues, dozens of them, possibly hundreds. Kincaid's gaze sharpened. Rogues don't move like armies. The soldier hesitated. They do now, Your Majesty. The words sank in, and for a moment the Alpha King said nothing. The wind shifted and a strange chill swept through him. A scent brushed his senses again. Wild jasmine, night-blooming flowers, and the faint metallic note of power. His wolf stirred within him, restless, confused. Mate. The word echoed deep in his mind, a whisper of agony and disbelief. He growled softly. No. She's gone. But his wolf didn't listen. It howled inside his chest, clawing at his soul as if trying to reach something unseen. He clenched his fists, forcing control. He remembered her eyes then, soft once, filled with warmth and belief. He remembered the way she'd looked at him on the night of the ceremony, when he'd rejected her in front of the entire court. She hadn't screamed or begged. She had simply looked at him, one last shattered look that had haunted him every night since. Why now? He muttered under his breath. Why do I feel her now? Behind him, the mist thickened, curling through the trees like smoke, and far ahead, beyond the forest ridge, a soft howl rose into the dawn. It wasn't one wolf. It was hundreds, unified, haunting, and powerful. The Forsaken were coming. For the first time in years, Kincaid felt fear. The air was sharp with the scent of iron and rain. Dawn had barely touched the horizon when the sound of war drums began to echo from the far ridge. Slow, steady, and merciless. Arya stood on the high ground overlooking the valley. Her cloak snapped in the wind, the silver threads woven into it glowing faintly under the breaking light. Behind her stretched the Forsaken army, wolves in formation, silent, disciplined, their eyes gleaming like shards of moonlight. They were no longer scattered rogues. They were a pack, her pack. Her wolf stirred uneasily, ancient and powerful, but she didn't fight it this time. "Stay focused," she murmured to herself. "He's just another alpha now." Raven's gaze flicked toward her, sharp. "You don't believe that." Arya turned to him, her expression unreadable. "Belief is a luxury I no longer afford." Below them, the mist began to shift, shapes moving within it. Soldiers in gleaming armor, banners high, their formation perfect. The royal army advanced like a tide, their howls echoing across the valley. Raven bared his teeth. "They look disciplined. They look afraid," Arya corrected softly. "They march for power, not honor. That makes them weak." He smiled faintly, golden eyes burning. "Then let's show them what true wolves fight for." Arya lifted her hand, and the wind obeyed. The trees bowed slightly, and the earth trembled beneath her feet. The moon, though fading in the brightening sky, seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. "Forsaken!" she called, her voice ringing through the air. "Tonight we howl not for vengeance, but for the truth they tried to bury." The battle began. Wolves collided in the clearing. Claws, fangs, metal, and fury. The royal army was larger, but the Forsaken moved with something far deadlier than training: purpose. Every strike, every bite, every howl carried rage born of betrayal and pain. Arya didn't join the fray at first. She stood on the ridge, her eyes glowing white, hands raised slightly. The ground pulsed beneath her, roots twisting, branches snapping as the forest itself seemed to awaken under her command. The earth obeyed its queen. Raven leaped into the chaos below, shifting midair, his massive black wolf form hitting the ground like thunder. He tore through armored soldiers, a blur of dark fur and gold eyes, his movements brutal and precise. The Forsaken rallied around him, their alpha roaring commands through the bond they all shared. But then, a stillness fell. Chapter 16. The Fall of the King. The royal army parted. A single figure rode forward on a white horse, his armor glinting silver and crimson, his aura crackling with authority. Kincaid. The Alpha King dismounted, his boots sinking into the blood-soaked earth. For a moment, all sound seemed to die. His eyes locked on her, the woman standing on the ridge, wrapped in moonlight and wind. Arya. Her face was calm, unreadable. The last time he'd seen her, she had been on her knees, broken and dying. Now she stood tall, power radiating from her like wildfire. Her hair, once soft brown, shimmered white under the light. Her eyes, no longer gentle amber, burned with silver fire. It stole his breath. For a heartbeat, they just stared at each other, fated mates divided by blood and ruin. Then Arya spoke, her voice low and cold. "You took everything from me, Kincaid. My pack, my name, my life. But you forgot one thing. The moon doesn't serve kings." Her hand lifted, and the ground erupted. Lightning cracked through the valley, not from the sky but from the soil itself, tearing through enemy lines. Wolves screamed as the earth split open, swallowing the front ranks whole. The forest roared, its roots wrapping around armor, dragging soldiers into the shadows. Kincaid's wolf surged within him, snarling, half in awe, half in agony. "What have you become?" he shouted. Arya's lips curved, sharp as a blade. "What you made me." The wind screamed, the Forsaken howled, and the Alpha King's army began to crumble under the wrath of the Luna he once betrayed. Arya stood at the front, her eyes glowing white with the moon's fury. Power rippled through her veins like lightning. Around her, Raven and the warriors charged, the sound of their battle cries blending with thunder. From the opposite ridge, Kincaid's army poured forward, gold-armored, fierce, desperate. At their head, the Alpha King himself, his blade gleaming in the rain. Their eyes met across the chaos. The bond between them snapped tight. Pain, memory, rage. She whispered under her breath, "For every life you broke, for every child that cried in the dark." And she ran. Steel met steel. Lightning flared as their swords clashed again and again until sparks danced between them. Kincaid's strength was monstrous. Her speed was divine. "You can't destroy what the moon blessed," he snarled, forcing her back. Her lips curved into a cold smile. "Then the moon will watch you fall." She broke the clash, spinning aside, channeling the power that had slept in her for years. The ground trembled beneath her feet. Shadows of wolves rose from the mist, spectral forms answering her call. The Forsaken surged forward behind her. The king's men faltered. Kincaid looked around, realizing too late his army was breaking. Fear spread faster than flame. Siren shouted something, but the next moment a ghostly wolf tore through the line, sending soldiers scattering. Arya's eyes glowed like silver fire as she faced him again. "This is your kingdom's end, Kincaid." "You think this makes you free?" he roared, lunging. "You're still bound to me." Their blades locked once more, and this time she didn't fight him. She released her power instead, letting the bond burn through her one final time. Their connection flared, then shattered. The sound was like glass breaking in the air. Kincaid staggered, clutching his chest as pain ripped through the mark on his soul. "What? What have you done?" "I severed what never should have existed," she said, voice trembling with fury and release. "You are no alpha of mine." The storm roared as she struck her final blow. Her blade cut through his emblem, tearing the crest of the crown from his armor. Power drained from him like blood. The mark of the Alpha faded from his aura, leaving nothing but a man, stripped bare. His wolves, those still alive, felt the bond break. One by one, they turned away from him, lowering their heads to Arya. Defeated, Kincaid fell to his knees in the mud, eyes wide with disbelief. "You took everything." "No," she whispered. "You threw it all away." Raven approached quietly behind her. "What do you command, Luna?" Arya's gaze lingered on the broken king. For a heartbeat, mercy flickered in her, then vanished. "Let him live." Kincaid's head snapped up. "Kill me and end this." She turned away. "Death would free you. I want you to feel the life you built crumble around you. Live as the thing you made others, unwanted, unbound, forsaken." The words struck harder than any blade. When she walked away, the rain swallowed her footsteps. Behind her, Kincaid screamed to the sky, the sound half human, half wolf, before shifting and vanishing into the trees. The once mighty king, now nothing but a rogue. And the storm began to fade. Chapter 17. The Last Moon. The war was over. The valley that had once been a graveyard now breathed again, reborn under the silver glow of the full moon. Among the rebuilt fires and shelters, laughter slowly returned. The Forsaken, once broken, once hunted, now stood as one. Warriors, healers, children, and rogues all shared one home, one name, one freedom, and at the center of it all stood Arya, the Luna reborn from pain, the woman who defied the gods and fate alike. Her white hair shimmered under the moonlight, her silver eyes reflecting both power and sorrow. She stood at the cliff's edge, overlooking the forest she had claimed. The night wind caressed her like an old friend, carrying whispers of peace instead of vengeance. Behind her, Raven approached, silent, sure, the strength of the wild in every step. His broad frame was shadowed by moonlight, his scars glinting faintly like silver lines of history. He stopped a few steps behind her. "You could come down," he said quietly. "They're waiting." Arya's lips curved faintly. "For what? To name me queen? To bow?" He shook his head. "To thank you for giving them a home." "They built it," she murmured. "I only gave them reason to stop running." Raven stepped beside her then, folding his arms, his gaze fixed on the stars. "That's what a true Luna does." Silence stretched between them, the soft hum of the forest their only witness. Then his voice lowered, rough but steady. "Arya," he said, "I need to tell you something before this night ends." She turned toward him, eyes narrowing slightly. Not from anger, but the instinct of someone who's learned to guard her heart. "What is it?" He met her gaze without hesitation. "The wind brought me to you. I followed it, thinking it was fate. But I was wrong." Her brow furrowed. "Wrong?" He nodded slowly. "It wasn't fate that brought me. It was choice. Mine. I stayed because I chose to. I fight beside you because I want to. And I love you because I decided to. Not because the bond tells me to." Her lips parted, but no words came. "I know what you'll say," he continued softly. "That I should find my true mate. That the goddess might have someone written for me. But I don't want a love that's forced into my blood. I want a love I can shape myself. The same way you built this world, with your own hands, not the ones fate gave you." He took a slow breath. "So whether you accept me or not, whether you ever call me mate or not, I'll still follow you. Until my last breath. Not as a subject, not as a follower, but as a man who chose you." For a long moment, Arya only looked at him. The moonlight washed over her pale face, softening the hardness in her eyes. And then, slowly, a small, rare smile touched her lips. "Then let be my commander, my advisor, and my chosen mate," she whispered. That was all he ever wanted from the moment he saw her. But now he could be hers by heart, she chose him. When he touched her cheeks, when he crashed his lips to her, that wasn't what she expected. She thought of normality. But his kiss was fire, was desire, was need and love. Then she kissed him back because her heart ordered her to. When they both were out of birth, she smiled and Raven bowed his head slightly, not in submission, but in quiet devotion. And for the first time since the curse that bound her, Arya felt something stir within her chest. Not the ache of loss, but the fragile warmth of possibility. Below them, the Forsaken raised their voices to the night sky, their howls rising like a hymn. The moon shimmered above, casting its silver blessing over the new kingdom. And as the wind swept around them, carrying the scent of pine and freedom, the world knew the Forsaken Luna had risen. And beside her stood the man who chose her, not by fate, but by heart.